Flea markets. The perfect blend of treasure hunt and yard sale, where you can find everything from rare antiques to a half-used bottle of ketchup. They're part nostalgia trip, part scavenger hunt, and 100% chaos. But despite their charm, or maybe because of it, flea markets come with a whole lot of quirks and weirdness that keep us both entertained and slightly horrified. Whether you're searching for that one-of-a-kind collectible or just trying not to get trapped in a haggling war, there's plenty that makes flea markets a wild ride. Sorry to interrupt, but if you survive the smell of mothballs mixed with corn dogs, you can survive pressing subscribe. The overpriced junk. One of the biggest mysteries at flea markets is how people think their vintage trash is worth a small fortune. You'll see rusted tools, chipped teacups, and ancient VHS tapes priced like they're made of gold. Somewhere along the line, people decided that just because something is old, it must be valuable. Well, spoiler alert, it's not. Just because you found that ceramic cat statue in your grandma's attic doesn't mean it's a rare artifact. Sometimes junk is just junk, but good luck telling that to the vendors who act like they're selling you a piece of the crown jewels. The endless haggling battle. Haggling at a flea market is a sport, but not everyone's good at it. You'll either run into sellers who refuse to budge on their sky-high prices, or shoppers who think they're about to score a $1 Rolex. The back-and-forth negotiation might be part of the charm, but after about 20 minutes of arguing over a $5 trinket, it starts to feel more like a hostage negotiation than a pleasant shopping experience. Also, there's the guilt trip strategy. The vendor tells you a sob story about how they need the money, only to see them turn around and pull the same trick on the next poor soul. Yes, it's the joy of human interaction at its finest. The random food stall with questionable hygiene. No flea market experience is complete without stumbling across a food stall selling something that smells both delicious and slightly hazardous to your health. Whether it's a mystery meat kebab or a deep-fried concoction, you're always taking a risk. The sanitation is, well, let's just say relaxed. You're torn between hunger and the very real possibility of spending the next 24 hours regretting your life choices. But hey, if you've survived flea market food before, you've built an iron stomach that could probably withstand anything. The never-ending maze of stalls. Navigating a flea market is like being trapped in an elaborate maze designed by a madman. There's no rhyme or reason to the layout, and once you enter, you're not entirely sure you'll ever find your way out. Stalls are packed with everything from clothing to furniture to bizarre knickknacks, and no matter how many times you think you've seen it all, there's always another route to explore. Just when you think you've looped around to the beginning, you realize you're completely lost. You could swear you've passed the same booth 3 times, but each time it has new and weirder junk. You begin to question if time works the same way inside a flea market. The bizarre encounters with vendors. Flea market vendors are a special breed. You've got the overly chatty ones who will regale you with tales of how they found their wares, often giving away more detail than you ever needed. Then there are the silent but deadly vendors who watch you like a hawk the moment you step within 5 feet of their booth, just waiting for you to pick something up so they can pounce. And let's not forget the vendors who specialize in selling the truly weird. Whether it's a collection of unsettling clown figurines or a bucket full of doll heads, you'll leave with more questions than answers. There's always that one person selling something so bizarre, you're half convinced they've been hoarding it in a basement for years. The "it's vintage" excuse. If I had a nickel for every time a vendor slapped the word vintage on something that was clearly just old and ugly, I'd have enough to buy an entire booth. There's a fine line between vintage and outdated junk, and flea market sellers love to blur that line. You'll see a tattered armchair from the 90s proudly labeled as mid-century modern, or a scratched-up record player marketed as a retro music system. The magic word vintage is the ultimate cop-out for trying to justify an unreasonable price tag. Newsflash, just because it's from a different decade doesn't mean it's valuable or desirable. The knockoff goods. Need a Louis Vuitton bag but only have $20 to your name? Flea markets have you covered. The number of counterfeit items at these places is staggering. From fake designer bags to knockoff electronics that will probably explode if you plug them in, flea markets are a treasure trove of bootlegged goods. But hey, if you're willing to risk walking around with a Dolce & Gabbana purse or using a Samsung phone that's suspiciously spelled Samsung, then more power to you. Just don't act surprised when your purchase falls apart after one use. The weather roulette. Flea markets are often outdoors, which means you're at the mercy of the weather gods. It's either blisteringly hot and you're sweating through your clothes while sifting through piles of stuff, or it's raining and the vendors are desperately trying to cover their wares with plastic tarps. Either way, it's a lose-lose situation. And of course, no matter what the weather is, someone is always complaining. It's too hot for shopping, or the rain's ruining everything. There's always something. The real MVPs are the vendors who somehow manage to act like everything is perfectly fine while their entire stall is literally blowing away in the wind. The one man's trash reality check. There's a saying that one man's trash is another man's treasure, but at flea markets, that often gets flipped on its head. The amount of pure garbage being sold as collectibles is impressive. Old VHS tapes, used kitchen utensils, broken toys. It's like everyone decided that nothing is too useless to sell. You'll find yourself sifting through piles of what can only be described as trash, wondering if anyone has ever actually bought this stuff. And yet, somehow, someone always does. There's a buyer for everything, even if it's a box of dented cans from who knows when. The inescapable cloud of incense. If you've ever walked through a flea market, you know that at least one booth is burning incense with a scent so strong it could probably wake the dead. Whether it's to mask the smell of mildew or just to add ambiance, flea market incense is a special kind of overpowering. You'll leave the market smelling like you've been living in a yoga studio for a week. Even worse, the smoke somehow sticks to you, and you'll find yourself catching whiffs of patchouli long after you've left. It's the gift that keeps on giving, whether you want it or not. The disappearing Wi-Fi connection. In an age where we rely on smartphones for everything, you'd think flea markets would be a little more tech-friendly. Wrong. Flea markets exist in some sort of Wi-Fi dead zone where your phone is basically useless. Need to check if that rare comic book is actually worth the price? Too bad. Good luck getting any kind of signal. This also makes it impossible to look up reviews or even send a quick text to your friend about whether you should buy that vintage lamp. You're stuck making decisions in the dark, which might explain some of the regrettable purchases people walk away with. The constant cash only policy. In a world where we can pay for a cup of coffee with our phones, it's amazing how many flea market vendors still insist on cash only. Nothing derails your shopping groove quite like having to hunt down the nearest ATM because the seller won't accept your card. And of course, the ATMs conveniently located near flea markets charge absurd withdrawal fees. You'll end up paying an extra $3 just to get enough cash to buy that $10 piece of questionable vintage furniture. It's a vicious cycle, and the vendors know it. The artisan. Products that are questionably artisan. Every flea market has at least one vendor claiming their goods are artisan or handcrafted. While some of these items are genuinely impressive, others look like they were thrown together in about 5 minutes with some hot glue and a lot of hope. There's a fine line between homemade charm and DIY disaster, and flea markets walk that line with reckless abandon. You'll find handmade jewelry that looks suspiciously mass-produced or local art that was clearly printed off of someone's home computer. But hey, as long as it's labeled artisan, it's worth the price, right? Wrong. The eternal search for parking. If there's one thing that can make or break your flea market experience, it's parking. You'll either get lucky and snag a spot close to the entrance, or you'll find yourself hiking from what feels like another time zone just to reach the market. There's no middle ground. The worst part is the parking attendants who seem to enjoy watching you struggle to parallel park or navigate the confusing lot. It's like they get some kind of sadistic pleasure out of it. And once you finally park, you're already exhausted before you've even started shopping. The vintage clothing delusion. Let's talk about the vintage clothing booths that look more like the aftermath of a garage sale. Sure, there might be a few gems hidden among the racks, but most of it looks like stuff that got rejected by thrift stores. Torn shirts, stained dresses, and pants that haven't been in style since the 80s are somehow passed off as retro chic. The worst part is watching people try to convince themselves that they've found a fashion treasure, when in reality, they're about to spend $30 on a moth-eaten sweater that smells like someone's basement. The flea market personalities. You can always count on flea markets to attract a wide array of characters. From the overly enthusiastic sellers who act like they're auditioning for QVC, to the eccentric shoppers wearing clothes that look like they belong in a flea market booth themselves. It's a people-watching paradise. You'll overhear some of the most bizarre conversations, usually involving someone haggling over an item that no one in their right mind would buy. It's part of the charm, but also part of what makes flea markets a bit of a circus. The overly ambitious do-it-yourselfers. Every flea market has that one booth filled with upcycled furniture that's supposed to look chic, but mostly just looks like someone got carried away with Pinterest. You'll see chairs with mismatched legs, tables painted in neon colors, and shelves made out of old pallets that don't quite hold anything. These DIY projects might have started with good intentions, but somewhere along the way, things went very, very wrong. And yet, there's always someone who thinks they can fix it up once they get it home. Spoiler, they won't. The mismatched stall themes. Flea markets are a strange blend of everything and nothing at the same time. You'll find one booth selling vintage vinyl records right next to another booth selling herbal supplements. There's no logical flow to any of it. It's as if every vendor is operating in their own little universe, completely unaware that they're competing with a stall selling homemade candles and essential oils. The randomness is both entertaining and confusing, and you'll find yourself bouncing between booths without any clear sense of direction. The strange collectibles you've never heard of. Flea markets are a haven for collectors, but some of the collections on display are downright bizarre. Whether it's an entire stall dedicated to Pez dispensers or a booth filled with ceramic clown figurines, you'll quickly realize that there's a market for just about anything. You'll leave with more questions than answers, like who collects vintage salt and pepper shakers? Or why would anyone need a 12-foot garden gnome? The strangest part? People actually buy this stuff. Flea markets are proof that no hobby is too obscure. The unbelievable amount of dust. If there's one thing that flea markets have in abundance, it's dust. Everything is covered in a fine layer of dirt, like these items have been sitting in someone's attic for decades. It's impossible to touch anything without feeling like you need to wash your hands immediately afterward. Even worse, if you're allergic to dust, you're in for a miserable experience. Flea markets are like walking into a giant open-air allergen trap. If you're lucky, you'll escape with only mild sneezing. If not, well, pack some allergy meds. Everything is negotiable. One of the unspoken rules of flea markets is that everything is negotiable. Whether you're buying a used book or a vintage dresser, the price is just a suggestion. But sometimes, this can backfire when sellers decide they're in no mood to play the haggling game. You'll encounter vendors who act personally offended when you offer less than their asking price, even though that's part of the flea market culture. It's a delicate dance of negotiation, and if you're not careful, you'll either overpay or walk away empty-handed. The flea market regulars. Every flea market has its regulars. The people who show up every weekend, rain or shine, ready to hunt for treasures. They know the layout like the back of their hand and can spot a deal from a mile away. But here's the thing, they take flea market shopping way too seriously. These regulars treat flea markets like competitive sport, and they're not above elbowing you out of the way to get to that vintage lamp you had your eye on. It's both impressive and a little terrifying. The overly aggressive sales tactics. You're just browsing, minding your own business, when suddenly a vendor pounces. "Can I help you find something?" they ask, hovering way too close for comfort. You try to politely decline, but they persist, showing you every item in their booth as if your life depends on it. Before you know it, you're trapped in a conversation about the rare vase you accidentally glanced at, and they're convinced you're about to buy it. Sometimes, the only way out is to fake a phone call and make a run for it. Less than, greater than. And there you have it. Do you visit flea markets, and what was your best purchase? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.